Unplugged here, and we're going to continue talking about a story that was in the Wall Street Journal on September the 27th, the year 2001. It was on page 3, and those of you who watch this program, many of you saw the story, and we want to get an opportunity now to find out exactly what was in the story and how the author of it came to the information. Daniel Golden, good morning in Boston.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about this story. What were the basics that you had in it?
Well, the nub of the story was about the relationship between the bin Laden family's company, which is the Saudi bin Laden Group, and its relationship to the Carlyle Group, which is a Washington merchant bank that specializes in leveraged buyouts of defense contractors. The bin Laden Group is a small investor in the Carlyle Group, and as a result, it's also become quite friendly with and associated with a bunch of Republican leaders, because the Carlyle Group, among the heavyweights connected with it, are former Secretary of Defense Frank Carlucci, former Secretary of State James Baker, and former President George Bush.
How did you get onto this story?
Well, we had done a previous story about the bin Laden Group's connections with companies in the United States. Via their website, which they've since taken down, they listed a bunch of American and Western companies that they'd done business with. And that kind of led me naturally to looking at some of their political connections and some of their other investments.
Now, the Carlyle Group, based here in Washington, is it a public company?
I don't believe so. I believe it's privately held.
How much information were you able to get directly from them when you went after the story?
Well, not a great deal of information, but, you know, they did confirm that the bin Laden Group was an investor.
And what about the connection between the former president? You mentioned in your story that he had a couple meetings with the bin Laden family, and how when you first went after it, though, they told you of only one in 1998?
Yeah, that's right. I think his aides said that just that his memory is not as good as it once was. They only owned up to one meeting at that time, and later they acknowledged 2 meetings. The reason being that I had some evidence of the 2 meetings. I'd been shown some thank you notes that the former president and Mr. Carlucci and Mr. Baker and so on had written after visiting the bin Laden Group's home and headquarters in Saudi Arabia. You know, most of these officials in the last few years, or former government officials, had visited there on business related to the Carlyle Group and had met the head of the bin Laden family and some of the other brothers.
Why would people who had received these thank you notes from the former president and others show them to you?
Well, I think they would show them to me because the bin Laden Group is very worried about its name. You know, they know that their brother, obviously, is a notorious the world over. And so I think they show these notes to people with whom they want to do business in order to convince them that they're a legitimate company and that they're not some kind of terrorist front.
Now, people watching this show, some people, leaped to the conclusion immediately that this interconnection with the bin Laden family is helping to benefit the Bush family, that George Bush in the White House has a direct benefit to all this. And the conspiracy theorists suggest that, I mean, the farthest charge, you might as well get it on the table, is that this was all created by the Bush family for their own personal benefit. Want to deal with that?
Well, I don't know of any evidence to substantiate any conspiracy theory. I think that you know, wealthy Saudi Arabian businessmen with money to invest have long had a lot of access to, you know, our ruling elite, and that this is really no different, and that these American officials were persuaded that the bin Laden family, you know, had completely disowned or had a complete rupture with Osama, and they saw no harm in financial partnership with them.
Do you get any sense of how much money is made at the Carlyle Group off of the connection with the bin Laden Group?
Well, the bin Laden investment appears to be pretty small. They're in one particular fund, and according to the Carlyle Group, they only put $2 million in it, which is pretty small because it's a fund of over $1 billion. Other sources I have indicate that it may be more than $2 million, but I don't think anybody feels they're a huge investor. I think in a way that the bin Laden connection has helped the Carlyle Group more because it opens a lot of doors in Saudi Arabia. You know, the bin Ladens are very close to the royal family in Saudi Arabia. They're one of the, you know, half-dozen wealthiest families there, and you know, their name there is like Rockefeller or something. It just opens a lot of doors.
You point out in your story that former President Jimmy Carter has met with 10 of Osama's brothers early in 2000. What's that about?
Well, Jimmy Carter went there, went to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, where the bin Ladens are based. He was looking for contributions to the Carter Center, I believe for some health program to combat disease in the Third World. And he negotiated with the bin Ladens in Saudi Arabia, and then later he and Rosalind Carter met with some of the bin Ladens in New York City, and they eventually received a $200,000 donation to the Carter Center.
You obviously thought this story was important, or you wouldn't even have gone after it or written it. What do you think what's the conclusion after you've done this story? What should the American people think about this?
Well, I think there's two aspects to it that are important. One is, I mean, they are Usama's family, and although they have disowned him and there's been a rupture, you know, it's still worth pursuing whether there's a relationship there. Clearly, the brothers who head the family are not in contact with him and have disowned him, but it's a big family. There's something like 54 brothers and sisters, or 53 in that realm, and some of them may be in contact with Usama. Also, I think it's been reported that one of Usama's brothers-in-law, a husband of one of his sisters, was regarded as a terrorist by Philippine police. That guy's now living in Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure on what terms he is with the family, but I think it's worth exploring and asking whether everybody in the family is as resolute in their denunciation of Usama as the heads of the family are. There's another meaning, too, which, you know, it's part of, I think, a total issue of the United States' relationship with the ruling Saudi Arabian elite. You know, that elite has long been accused of corruption and nepotism and the like. And the bin Ladens are so close to the Saudi royal family that being cozy with the bin Ladens may reflect an overall problem in sort of our relationship with Saudi Arabia and its government and its people.
Daniel Golden is in Boston, and what you see behind him there on that picture, it's a still picture, is the harbor at Boston. He is a native of Amherst, Massachusetts, a Harvard graduate, has been a reporter since 1999 at the Wall Street Journal. Before that, 18 years with the Boston Globe. We take our first call from Santiago, Chile this morning. Go ahead, please, Santiago, you're on the air.
Thank you. My name is Gina. I'm from Santiago, Chile. I'm glad to hear your program. It's very interesting. There are two things that, at least I think here. We have the feeling that America has been a little bit weak on their politics. You have all these huge developments and technology, and you have Israel in the Middle East that can help. Why don't you cut it down more quickly, more force, and that's it. You know, we live in the end of the world here in South America. We belong to the Jewish community, and we're always afraid we have to take care of the children at school, doing guard around, even happen anything here, but it all the time affects us. I think you have the whole technology to put and cut down this stuff quickly.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Golden is here as a guest to talk about the article that he wrote about the Carlyle Group and the bin Laden family and George Herbert Walker Bush. You're free to say anything you want to about this call, but if you don't want to, we can just move on.
Well, I think that, you know, my overall comment would just be that it's difficult to be strong when you're not precisely sure who the enemy is and where they are. And I'm sure if we were more certain about that, we'd probably be acting more strongly.
When you did your story on the bin Laden group and the Bushes, people willing to talk to you at every stop?
No, you know, James Baker declined comment, Frank Carlucci declined comment. I mean, a lot of people are clearly embarrassed now to have their connections with the bin Laden family revealed.
Centerville, Virginia, you're next.
First of all, I'd like to thank Brian for your integrity and honesty in this programming.
Thank you.
Mr. Golden, I'm familiar. I have read things on the Internet, overseas websites concerning the Carlyle Group and the bin Laden connection. But I was wondering, have you read anything about the inside trading that went on shortly after the attacks? We heard about it, and we haven't heard anything else since. And I was wondering if you had read anything or heard anything.
Insider trading by what group?
Well, that's what we don't know.
I've probably read some of the same reports you have, but I don't know if they're accurate or not. I haven't really researched that.
When you did your story, how active was the Carlyle Group? And by the way, we asked the Carlyle Group to come on and respond to all this, and they didn't return our phone calls, and we tried all day yesterday. At least when I left the office, they may have come in late. But how active were they in answering your questions?
Well, they did not want to answer them by name. They had one of their top executives talk to me on a not for use of the name basis. And, you know, on that basis, they were fairly forthcoming. But as I say, there's this unresolved dispute over how much money the bin Ladens actually have in their fund and how deep the relationship goes. And I think it's too bad that they weren't able to come on camera and discuss it further.
Are there any other people that you know of associated with the Carlyle Group who have past connections with any administration besides Frank Carlucci and Jim Baker and George Herbert Walker Bush?
I believe there are some former Reagan and Bush administration officials on their board of directors and as advisors. I don't have the list with me, but I believe Richard Darman, perhaps, and there's some others.
Tampa, Florida, for Dan Golden of the Wall Street Journal. Good morning.
Brian, my comment is to you first. Did you have any solid evidence before you invited this rhetoric on your TV that you have, Brian, did you find evidence? And the instigation that you spilled out this morning was maybe it was something to do with the campaign. This is not right, Brian. You're being biased against President Bush. Now, I have a question for the gentleman there.
Yeah, well, the question about bias is the gentleman on the screen from Boston, Dan Golden, wrote the article. A lot of people have called this program since the article came out. This is your opportunity to talk directly with him.
Exactly.
Please go ahead.
Exactly, and it's my opportunity to question you, too.
Go right ahead.
Okay. And now, you are a disgrace to journalism. First of all, you need evidence before you start spewing and writing about our president and our former president. And this is you're a disgrace. Why didn't you publish anything about how Gore and Clinton sold our secrets to China?
Caller, let me ask you a question. What evidence do you want beyond what he's actually written so far? What has he written so far that is incorrect or is against what you think he should write?
Brian, my question to you, did you have any evidence before you invited this guest on your show?
Evidence for what, ma'am?
For what he's, the incorrect facts that he's spewing out.
What incorrect facts is he spewing out?
Because he's the only journalist that's ever brought anything like this into the public's eye.
Why does that make him incorrect?
Well, why haven't you, it's back to you again. Why
Maybe I could, if I could speak to this for a minute. As Brian pointed out, the story appeared September 27th, you know, in a prominent publication, the Wall Street Journal. Nobody has asked for any correction or raised any question of accuracy about the story since then. As I indicated, it's undisputed that these various political leaders visited the bin Laden family in the last few years. Now, there's one aspect on which other publications have gone farther than my story did, and on which I was very careful. About 20 years ago, the older brother, one of the older brothers of Osama bin Laden, Salim bin Laden, he frequented Texas. He spent a lot of time there. And he had business interests there, and he had a business representative named Jim Bath. Now, Mr. Bath was a close friend of our current president, George W. Bush, and invested in a couple of funds that Mr. Bush then controlled, oil-related funds. Now, a number of publications have leaped to the conclusion that, therefore, Mr. Bath was investing bin Laden money in these Bush oil funds. But I can tell you that, you know, we found no evidence that it was anything other than Mr. Bath's own money, and as Mr. Bath has claimed on numerous occasions. And, you know, so we wrote the story. We were very careful to indicate that there was no indication of a financial connection between the bin Ladens and George W. Bush.
Let me go back to our caller for a moment in Tampa. Caller, let me ask you a question again, though. Nobody said that anybody's done anything wrong here. Why are you upset?
Brian, may I suggest one more thing, and I thank you for taking this...
Would you mind answering my question? I said nobody's said anything, anybody's done anything wrong here. Why are you upset?
What is he publishing? What is this rhetoric that he's publishing about our former president?
What's rhetoric about this? What's
Brian?
what's rhetorical about this?
Brian, it's exactly what he's stating in his column.
Okay, I'm going to let you go. Mr. Golden, you want to follow up on anything?
No, I think that, you know, she's concerned about perhaps us implying some kind of guilt by association. And, you know, we didn't do that. We simply laid out the facts, and I think it's important for the public to know them.
Kenosha, Wisconsin, for Dan Golden. You're on the air.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Mr. Golden a question. There's a rumor flying around Wisconsin that the bin Laden family and the Carlyle Group have a joint venture project to build a pipeline from all the former Soviet Union stand states to the Arabian Sea. And that pipeline would have to go through Afghanistan, which puts a whole new light on the situation of why we might be there.
Anything on that, Mr. Golden?
I never heard of that.
Let's go to San Diego next for Dan Golden of the Wall Street Journal. You're on the air.
Yes, hi, good morning. I think the story is very interesting, and we could add a sequel, which is full cooperation in between Clinton administration and bin Laden people in Bosnia. These people have an airport built by Clinton administration. They were supplied arms through Croatia and Slovenia into the Bosnian war, and even as we speak, American embassy in Bosnia is closed due to the bin Laden's threat.
Anything about this that you know of, Mr. Golden?
I don't really know about that either. I mean, obviously, our foreign policy in relation to Osama bin Laden's been fluid. I mean, years ago in Afghanistan, when they were fighting the Soviet Union, we were on the same side. But I don't know anything about the Bosnian situation in particular.
How often have you found that former political people or people in our government have done business then with the countries that they were engaged with when they were in an administration? And is it only a Republican administration that does this?
Well, as I think you know, we mentioned before, Jimmy Carter obviously solicited a gift from the bin Laden group, and I would think that officials of you know, both parties, once they leave office, you know, nobody is neither party is totally free of people who probably link up afterwards for financial reasons.
Do I have Dallas on the line?
Yes, sir.
You're on with Dan Golden. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Golden, this pipeline was going to start in Turkmenistan, in the biggest gas field in the world. It was going to run down through Afghanistan, through Pakistan, down the Arabian Gulf. They were going to build an oil pipeline and a gas pipeline. It's going to cost $5 billion. The Saudi bin Laden company was going to be a major participant in it. It's all about money. Follow the money. Talk to Jeff Fowler of your foreign desk. He's got all the information on it.
Mr. Golden.
Well, I'm glad to hear we're all over that story, and you know, all I can tell you in that realm is that, you know, the Saudi bin Laden Group is predominantly a construction company in the Middle East. They have had interests in getting into oil exploration, and they had a joint venture with, I believe it's HC Price or HG Price Company, which has a Texas office, in the mid-1990s to do oil exploration. But from what I was told, they failed to win contracts, and so ultimately the joint venture ended around 1997 or 1998.
Mr. Golden, when was the first time you had any inclination that this was a story for you? I mean,
well,
go as far back as you can.
Well, you know, my normal beat is actually covering education, so I'm not a lifelong student of the bin Ladens. After September 11th, you know, I was scrambling to help out in the coverage, and you know, I thought of looking a little bit at the bin Laden family business, and as I said, on their website they listed just a multitude of companies in the West that they do business with. I had thought they were just a construction company in the Middle East. It turns out they're a reseller of all kinds of things, telecommunications equipment, food and beverages, from American companies like Motorola, Nortel, which is Canadian, Picturetel, and so I got interested in that, and I began to cultivate some contacts among the bin Laden family and spokespeople for the bin Laden family, and you know, financial people who deal with them. And once I realized that once I was told that these former American leaders or officials were meeting with the bin Ladens, and once I learned that the Carlyle Group was predominantly defense industry oriented, you know, you'd have to be kind of a fool journalistically not to see that the idea of the bin Laden family having an investment in the American defense industry, was not a story, because it obviously was.
Did you find Vice President Cheney and his former life with Halliburton anywhere in that story?
I didn't in relation with the bin Ladens in particular, though I would say that might bear more scrutiny. I know that there's been some contacts there between Halliburton and Saudi Arabian families in general, but I don't know about the bin Ladens specifically.
Guayaquil, Ecuador, for Dan Golden of the Wall Street Journal. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you and good morning for such a creative program. But I wanted to say that right after the election, I went into the internet on the google.com and I traced it, the bin Ladens, the Bushes, everybody. There's so many corporations in which American businessmen are representing these families and these ventures in the Middle East and all over. And it's about excavation, exploration, oil, and so forth and so on. This is in the internet. This is all over the books. I think Mr. Golden just brought it into a major journal newspaper. But people want to be blind. So all you have to do is go to the internet and follow so many leads, and you will see that there is definitely something inappropriate. And I feel bad for what is going on in America. But sometimes, guilt lies on whatever people or companies are trying to do business to the expense of maybe compromising friendship or security. So I applaud Mr. Golden's book, and more Americans should come and speak about these things. Mr. Golden, congratulations, and also to the host of the program.
Mr. Golden, is there a possible way for people to get your story? Is it still on the internet somewhere that they can get it?
Yeah, it should be on the Wall Street Journal website.
And it was September the 27th?
That's right.
And what kind of reaction did you get from the story?
Well, it's been interesting. It's been kind of a delayed reaction. I mean, when the story originally ran, I didn't get much, if any. And then, in the last week to 10 days, I've been getting more phone calls, more emails. It seems to have taken a while to kind of catch on, which is pretty unusual in my experience.
Has anybody fed you new information in this process that you're interested in pursuing?
Yeah, we have a couple leads, and if they pan out, we may do another story.
With a group like the Carlyle Group, how can you get to the bottom of what they are and who's on their board and how much money they make? Is it possible if they're not a public company?
Well, it's not easy. I mean, there's a lot of information on their website. There's a lot of executives who used to be at the Carlyle Group and have now left. The typical journalistic ways of trying to look into something.
San Diego, for Dan Golden of the Wall Street Journal. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning. I salute Mr. Golden simply because he's doing investigative reporting, which is becoming a dinosaur, it seems, in this country. The woman who had all of the fear of any discussion would not answer any questions about how in fact what was being reported was an offense. Typifies what the climate is becoming. I just recently asked to unsubscribe from U-Comics when they canceled Boondocks, and then I was told, because I said I would not to resubscribe me when the censorship stopped, that all of our names had been forwarded to the FBI. So within this climate, we've got to have more and more people, and I teach 1984, and this is what I told them. We have to have more and more people who will not be afraid to investigate issues.
Thanks, caller. You having a receptive desk there at the Wall Street Journal for more investigative reporting?
Oh, yeah. The Journal is always very interested in a good investigative story.
When you went after the information on the bin Laden family, how many of the brothers, or I don't even know if they're all brothers, but how many of the family, the 50 children, are involved in the bin Laden businesses?
Well, that's a good question. There's not a whole lot of information. My sense is that most of them have some kind of stake in the business financially. Exactly how many participate, I think there's, 7 or 8 or maybe a dozen who are in key leadership positions in the business, just judging from looking at the board of directors and things like that. you know, it's a little hard to know. In fact, it's a little hard to know exactly what financial relationship Osama bin Laden has with the business. We've been told different things at different times. My best understanding is that, you know, he inherited some stock in the business from his father, who died in a plane crash in the late 60s. It took him, I think, many years and the rest of the family to sort of clear up the estate and decide who got what. And then when there was a rupture with the rest of the family, he lost his Saudi citizenship. He moved to Sudan, and my understanding is that his holdings in the company are frozen, maybe in a trust of some kind. But it's difficult. You know, we don't have enough information to untangle the whole finances of the Saudi bin Laden group.
Edwardsburg, Michigan, for Dan Golden of the Wall Street Journal. Go ahead, please.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that I think that the lady that had called before is commendable in the fact that she is trying to honor our president. But I think when we stop asking questions and when we stop wondering what's going on with our government and our country, we belittle ourselves and we might lose out on something that's really important to ourselves. I think this man has done a great job on trying to find information and giving us information so that we can ask questions. And I don't think that he was trying to do anything but find information out. I'm kind of concerned about people still being able to come over here and take airline flight, what's the word I want? Take more schooling for that. I wish somebody would look into that because they said that's not supposed to be against the law. Well, hey, wake up, people. We need new laws. We need our government to start making new laws for the new times, and they're not doing that.
Thanks. Any comment, Mr. Golden?
Well, I think she's certainly correct in that there is a lot of concern about how easy it is to get a visa to come to this country. I'd also like to say, about the bin Laden family that, even more than just disowning Osama, I mean, they have been good allies to the U.S. in a number of ways. They after the truck bombing in Saudi Arabia in 1996, when a bunch of American servicemen were killed, they built new barracks for the servicemen. They were helpful to us in the Gulf War, so that they're not simply wealthy Saudi businessmen looking to make money in the U.S. They've been strong allies to us in time of need, and that should definitely be mentioned. And as well, Saudi Arabia is a country where a lot of the politics and society are built on kind of extended family networks. So for them to repudiate a brother is a pretty strong move to make and should be given credit.
This email, it's not signed by a person, but it says, "Where is Robert Rubin now? And is there anything ethically or morally different between what he's doing and what, say, Carlucci is doing?" It's from Maui, Hawaii.
I'm not familiar with what Mr. Rubin's activities now.
Let me just ask then a general question. Is there anything ethically or morally wrong from a former high executive in any administration from going into business, using their former contacts to help their business proliferate?
Well, I think there are ethical questions about it, not speaking about the case which I'm dealing with in particular, but in general, a lot of states, I know, have laws that restrict former officials from going into business right away with people that they've done business with while in the government. They'll have a 6-month or a 1 year or a longer waiting period because obviously somebody who has just left office may be in a position to exercise undue influence on a contract being awarded or on some other piece of public business that affects private enterprise. So obviously in a general way that there's long been an issue of the revolving door and the ethical questions that it raises.
If you've just joined us, Daniel Golden wrote an article on the September 27th, page 3 of the Wall Street Journal about the bin Laden family and its connection to the Carlyle Group and that connection to Jim Baker and Frank Carlucci and former President Bush. He is in Boston this morning. We said earlier that he's sitting in front of a photograph. He's actually sitting in front of what I guess would be a rear projection camera with, because those ship, those boats behind you are moving, so I suspect that's a videotape. Is that a picture out of a window?
I haven't actually looked behind me. When I look in front of me, I see a window, but it's got, it's got drapes on it, so I'm not sure. I know there's a view of Boston out there, but it's not very clear to me.
Mr. Golden resides in Belmont, Massachusetts. Do I remember correctly? That's where the John Birch Society is located, or was?
I think it was located there. My understanding is it isn't anymore, which I'm glad about.
San Francisco, California, next for Daniel Golden.
Good morning, Mr. Golden. I listen to you, and I find myself thinking that you sound like the proverbial politician who calls his opponent a thespian and expects it to have some impact. And I wonder, what is it about the fact that there's a business relationship between the Carlyle Group and the bin Laden family, which is a large industrial family in Saudi Arabia, which you pointed out in your article. Why should that cause anybody any concern whatsoever? Why is that an issue, given the fact that Osama is estranged from that family?
Well, as I believe I said before, he's estranged from the principal members of the family, but intelligence experts believe that he's still in contact with some members of the family. As I said, there's a dispute over his financial stake in the business, which he has some relationship to, although the money's frozen. He has a brother-in-law who's been identified as a terrorist. So these are all reasons why, at least I think it's worth a newspaper article to look at the relationship between the bin Laden family and the Carlyle Group and American business.
Any follow-up, caller?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've had some familiarity with Carlyle Group investments over the years. I know they were in America's Favorite Chicken, one example. And again, I understand that the connection between the family and Osama may be a little murky and is not a simple black and white estrangement. But again, my impression is that you are making an implication about the bin Laden family as a business organization and the Carlyle Group, which is a more nefarious implication that is probably warranted.
Thanks. Mr. Golden.
Yeah, I should add one other thing, which is that according to the biographies I've read of Mr. bin Laden, Osama, he used his family's sort of business network. It helped him get financial and other kinds of resources to make contacts. I mean, it's a network that he used as he was building up to the kind of notorious position he has today. So that's another reason why it bears scrutiny. And as for the Carlyle Group, I think that it's interesting that this is one place that they accepted money from, and I think that if they didn't feel a bit queasy about it, they probably would have been willing to be quoted in the paper and probably would have come on this show.
Stuttgart, Germany, next for Dan Golden. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Thank God for C-SPAN. I watch every chance I get. It's late afternoon here in Germany. I transplanted over here because of the smoke and mirrors. Does Mr. Golden happen to know why the government is lying to us? Anthrax is being a vaccine being made in Lansing, Michigan. They don't have the contract to make it for civilians because they've had trouble with the Food and Drug Administration. Also, there is so much smoke and mirrors going on about other things. They don't want panic. They don't want to let you know about the rotary engine, fuel cells, or any of those things. And a carburetor that gets much greater mileage. They don't tell you how gasohol can be used out of corn and would help the farmers. There are so many things that the government does. Good does evil, evil does good, and the key word is logic, and the key word that they don't want to happen in America is panic.
Dan Golden.
I'm not really an anthrax expert. I can't help him there.
Go back to your article, because the implication is made that the Carlyle Group continued to do business with the bin Laden family even after the 1993 World Trade Center bombing at that time. Did you ask anybody about why they continued after that? Because it's in the article.
Well, yeah, I think that the relationship from the Carlyle Group's account started in 1994 or so. I think that, as I've said, they felt assured, or so they say, that there wasn't a connection between the family, the rest of the family, and Osama. And they were looking for more contacts in Saudi Arabia. And as I say, the bin Laden family is very close to the royal family. It's close to other wealthy families in Saudi Arabia. And the Carlyle Group, I think, was looking to cultivate investors in that region, which is, of course, a very well-off, it's got some very well-off, prosperous millionaires and billionaires with money to invest.
Palmdale, California, for Dan Golden. You're next.
Hi. I'd like to thank Mr. Goldwyn for having the courage to shed the light on this family. I'm really tired of the hypocrisy and the stupidity of the right wing and how they are just into the big money and into the oil. To the lady from Tampa, Florida, wake up. Get your head out of the sand. The Bush family and corruptness go hand in hand. We had the Iran-Contra scandal, the stolen election, even now with the former resident at the White House. If you want to protest him, you have to be behind a First Amendment zone tape. You can't even, express your disgust or anything with him because you have to stand behind a certain area. I just really thank Mr. Golden for having the courage to shed the light. I mean, it's wonderful. And to the man from San Francisco, if this were Clinton instead of Bush, the Bush family, we would be spending billions of dollars investigating him. I'm really tired of the hypocrisy.
Mr. Golden, any retribution whatsoever from the Bush administration when this article came out?
No, as I said, it was largely ignored there for the first week or two, and only now is it getting this kind of groundswell.
And is there any fear, though, in a Wall Street Journal that an article like this would lead to this administration during a wartime to exclude you from some of the pools and things that happen at the Defense Department?
Well, I haven't heard anything like that. And, in my part, I'm not based in Washington. I'm based in Boston. I don't cover the administration on a regular basis, so it wouldn't affect me personally. And I haven't heard from anybody in the Washington Bureau any indication that this article was taken adversely. I think, it was seen as a very balanced account, as was my prior article on the bin Laden Group and its connections with American business. I mean, I think it was seen as newsworthy, and, we've emphasized that the bin Laden family group, as I said, aided the U.S. military in crucial times and, has disowned Osama. So I think they were grateful for the even-handed approach.
Dan Golden has been at the Wall Street Journal for 2 years. We go next to Pearl River, New York. Good morning.
Good morning. I was wondering why the press doesn't seem to go after the other side of the story, into the terrorists and the investigation of them. They seem to be on any superhighways of information that the government has created. They follow up and go into every nook and cranny, but they don't seem to create their own sources to bring new information in.
What are you talking about, caller? Give us some idea. What do you want them to do?
Well, who are all these terrorists? Are they over there investigating them? Are they looking into that?
Well, there have been reams of copy in the newspapers here on the East Coast about these terrorists and who they are.
Only the ones that were identified by the FBI and talked about as a total picture of what government information there is. There is no investigative reporting done that's bringing new stuff in or following them down and following all the leads on them as actively as they are, what missile was shot and what was the name on it.
I would comment that, there has been obviously pages and pages and pages and pages written about the hijackers and whatever we can find out about their associates. But I'd add, in fairness to the caller's point, it is an extraordinarily difficult story to cover. Partly because the investigation, understandably, is being played very close to the vest. So it's very hard to find out, for example, the names of the people who've been detained in the investigation and which ones are considered, to have terrorist connections and which ones are just being detained because of immigration violations. And, even if you know the names, it's very hard to know exactly on what basis, what facts are held. There's not been a lot of information given out in the courts. So a lot of our normal sources of information are dried up. There's not a lot of public documents. There's not a lot of, lawyers willing to talk. And so reporters, as a result, are forced to rely heavily on law enforcement sources. And there's a couple problems with that. Obviously, law enforcement sources are just as biased as any other source. What they find out, they also have incomplete information. What they find out one day may not prove to be true the next day, and it just makes it very difficult when all the trails simply lead back to whatever FBI or ATF or customs person you may be able to persuade to give you a few dribs and drabs.
In your September 27th article, here's what you say. You say a U.S. inquiry into bin Laden family business dealings could brush against some big names associated with the U.S. government. Former President Bush said through his chief of staff, Gene Baker, that he recalled only one meeting with the bin Laden family, which took place in November 1998. Ms. Becker confirmed that there was a second meeting in January 2000 after being read the ex-president's subsequent thank you note. President Bush does not have a relationship with the bin Laden family, says Ms. Becker. He's met them twice. Again, I go back to these thank you notes that were so famous when he was president. You actually saw the thank you note, or you just were read the words?
Well, I don't want to get into exactly the specifics of the source material I dealt with. But, obviously that was not a, that was absolutely correct, the text as you read it.
What advantage is it to the bin Laden family that this kind of an article be printed?
Well, I'm not sure it's to their advantage or disadvantage. To their advantage would be the parts of the story where we point out that they've disowned Osama and they've been helpful to the U.S. To their disadvantage might be that some of their business partners in the United States might be embarrassed and run for cover and not be eager to do business with them anymore. But that's not a consideration I have in mind.
You also say in your article, Mr. Baker, meaning Jim Baker, visited the bin Laden family in both 98 and 99, according to people close to the family. In the second trip, he traveled on a family plane. Mr. Baker declined comment, as did Mr. Carlucci, a past chairman of Nortel Networks Corp., which has partnered with Saudi bin Laden Group on telecommunications ventures. Again, it appears when you read the article that the bin Ladens wanted you and us to know that they were all close to this Carlyle Group.
No, I don't think so. They did not initiate the story, and I don't think, my sense is that the bin Laden family is not exactly eager for publicity right now.
Scottsdale, Arizona, for Dan Golden of the Wall Street Journal. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're on the air.
What I wanted to say was that it sounds like from your previous guest, Chris Matthews, and this guest, that you're insinuating that this war is being fought in Afghanistan over oil. And from the last time I checked, it was about 6,000 dead Americans. So it just seems like there's liberals calling in with these conspiracy theories about the Bushes and the Gulf War and whatnot. And I don't think you can say that this war is being fought over oil.
Don't go away. I'll let Mr. Golden react, and then you can come back at him. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually want to continue a point I made before, because I'm certainly not trying to imply that it's being fought over oil. That's obviously always been a big issue in the Mideast. Before, when I said that the bin Laden family wasn't eager for publicity, I just wanted to elaborate on that. I mean, one can have some sympathy for the bin Laden family as opposed to Osama in that they're kind of trapped between two worlds. They, back in Saudi Arabia, they have to pass muster with the fundamentalists. I mean, they have contracts to renovate the mosques at Mecca and Medina and other holy places, and if they don't appear suitably fundamentalist and strict in the Islamic sense, they might lose those contracts. On the other hand, they have a lot of friends in the United States. Some of their children, the next generation, were born here and are citizens here. A lot of them have been educated at American, prep schools and universities, and so they want to be on both sides at a time when the world is rapidly polarizing. And this was symbolized for me. I was told that one member of the bin Laden family, when he's in the United States, he's clean-shaven, but when he goes back to Saudi Arabia, he grows a beard because that's what good Muslims should do.
Let me ask the caller in Scottsdale, is this kind of a story fair game at this time?
Well, what I want to know is, does his story state all these things that he just told me? In fairness to, to explain a little bit more about the bin Laden's relation, or who they are, and, does his story go into those things?
It goes into some of them. Some of them there wasn't space for, and some of the other stuff I just mentioned I didn't know at the time I wrote it.
Well, there was I think a 60 Minutes piece, or one of those network pieces where they talked to a doctor who was a close friend of the bin Ladens, saying exactly the same thing that you did, that when they get on an airplane and come over here, they take off their garb and they shave, clean, and all that. I mean, is this cynical or what?
Well, I think you could see it as cynical, but you could also see it as kind of sad.
Why?
Well, because as I was saying, they've got these two different worlds that they're in between, and obviously it's not, it's not a tragedy or anything, but I think it's difficult for people who've built up a huge business in Saudi Arabia based on sort of good relations with the rest of the world to see it kind of crumbling in both places.
Montreal, Canada, for Dan Golden. You're next.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, sir. Thanks for joining us. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I work for a law firm in Montreal, and we handle many, many commercial contracts in Nova Scotia. And one which we worked on was the New York Times, which owns considerable property in Nova Scotia, including their pulp mills and ships and you name it, all above board. But the New York Times in Nova Scotia also has joint ventures with the Carlyle Group, and all again above board.
Sir, could I ask you a question?
Certainly.
As a lawyer, how are you able to even discuss this?
I can discuss it because you don't know who I am, and I thought I could add something to the conversation.
Oh, don't mind you calling. I just wondered from a standpoint of being in the law.
As long as I don't go into the details, I have no problem with it.
So what are you saying? What's the point of your
My point is that your show seems to be saying there's something nefarious about Carlyle and former President Bush having had contacts in the past with this Mid-East group. And so far, I would sum the article up as, so what? Now, the Salzburg, who own the New York Times, have contacts with that same group, and they have contacts with groups in Israel.
Thanks. Is your story nefarious?
No, I don't think it's either nefarious or a disgrace to journalism. As a previous caller put it, I don't think it's the most important investigative story ever written, but I think it adds a little to the context for people trying to understand what the world's like today, which is pretty much what I was trying to do.
Have you tried to get the Carlyle Group on the record after your story came out again?
No, I haven't, because as I mentioned before, I'm exploring some leads, but until they go a little farther, I don't have enough to ask the Carlyle Group about to make it worthwhile.
And our producer has told me that they did not call us back last night, so that we're still waiting for a call. I'd love to have them come on and explain the whole company, the whole outfit. Frank Carlucci or Jim Baker, any of them would be welcome here to talk about it. Let's go to Columbia, Missouri. You're on the air.
Yes, hi. I believe this whole issue is about guilt by association. I agree with the earlier caller who said that you're trying to smear the reputation of legitimate businesses and officials who dealt with the bin Laden family. The bin Laden family cannot have any control on Osama bin Laden. The guy is an adult. He can do anything he wants, and if he dealt with the connections that his family had with and other legitimate businesses, and it's not their fault, and it would be the fault of the businesses who directly dealt with Osama bin Laden, and that's it.
Caller, where is the smear here?
Well, number one, he has absolutely no reason to say that, to me, in my opinion, what he's saying is, well, and he's dealing with the bin Laden family, because they are relatives of that terrorist, they're also terrorists, because otherwise this will not have any reason to be written about.
Let me ask the caller one question. Do you think that we at the Wall Street Journal simply should not have printed this story, that it wasn't sufficiently newsworthy to put in the paper that former President Bush, former Secretary of State Baker, and former Secretary of Defense Carlucci had visited the bin Laden family headquarters within the last couple of years and had a financial relationship with them? Do you think that that's not even worthy of going in an American publication?
The reason why I say yes, I think that there is no reason to write about it because they are a legitimate business, aren't they? Did they deal with any terrorists? Are they terrorists? If Osama bin Laden dealt with the Carlucci's and the Bush himself, yes, I will agree with you totally, and this is newsworthy. But the fact that, example, I'll put myself in their situation. If one of my relatives was a criminal, I have no fault to it. Okay? And my reputation, myself, should not be punished for it. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, well,
And they cannot. This is an adult. He's not a child. It's not like they're able to control him or they're able to do anything about it. As a matter of fact, as you said, they have cut him off. Therefore, it's not newsworthy. What you are trying to say, in my opinion, and the way I conclude from what you have done, is not because this is newsworthy. It's because you're trying to say to any type of legitimate businesses, do not deal with the Arabs, do not deal with that part of the world, because otherwise we're going to smear your reputation. That's what you're trying to say, because I really cannot find any reason why they cannot deal with the Bin Laden family.
Thanks. Mr. Golden.
Yeah, as I said before, the relationship between the family members and Osama is a little bit murky. The families formally disowned him. The brothers who run the family have no contact with him. There were reports that he called his mother or stepmother, I wasn't clear which, a couple days before September 11th to let her know that something big was going to happen. He does have a brother-in-law, sister's husband, who's been identified as a terrorist by Philippine law enforcement authorities. He did have a financial stake in the company, and it's unclear what has happened to that. I think there's enough reason to at least raise the question about the family.
Mr. Golden, let me go to the person's point, though, and see if what your comment would be on that. Isn't it safe to assume that a lot of American public policy officials and administration participants are doing business today with the Israelis?
I'm just not familiar enough with that to say, but it sounds reasonable to me.
Let's go next to Nassau in the Bahamas for Dan Golden. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I do agree with the last caller that I know that sometimes it looks like he is trying to vilify Bush simply because Bush or whatever has some connections with the Bin Laden family. And you cannot, for instance, I know many families, the members of the families are fantastic, but there's one bad apple. Okay, all of a sudden I'm a bad guy. I say give the guy a break. Stop vilifying. And in my personal opinion, I believe the author has a personal agenda. There's more behind his reporting of this just to simply report it. He says, oh, don't you think it's worth reporting, yada, yada. I say to him this. Sometimes when you report, it's not just for the sake of reporting, but the personal agenda of the reporter has to be taken, just like a filmmaker has a point of view. You cannot do a completely disassociate yourself from the kind of film you are making or the kind of piece you are reporting. You always have a personal agenda. What is the reason? Just to report? No. I say there are reasons behind persons reporting what they're reporting. What is the author's actual agenda against this Bush man?
Thanks.
I can just tell you that, I have no personal agenda other than, trying to follow my nose toward a good story. And I would differentiate between a film, which I would agree is a very personal statement, and a news story, which I don't think is such a personal statement.
Are you surprised at the number of calls that have come in this morning that think this is not a story?
Yeah, I think I perceive a certain defensiveness, as if, somehow the story were unpatriotic. And all I can say is those aren't the kind of considerations that motivate me when I research a story. And on this particular story, I had two co-authors, an editor in Boston, editors in New York. It was a group decision to report and run this story. And
what was their reaction to this?
They liked the story, or they wouldn't have put it in the paper. It was not heavily rewritten or edited or anything. There was not this kind of discussion. I think everybody felt that it was sufficiently newsworthy. Now, they didn't put it on page 1. They put it on page 3, which I think was a reflection that they didn't want to make too much of it. But obviously, page 3 is a good placement, and they felt it was worth the attention of the American public.
Sylmar, California, for Dan Golden. Just a couple minutes left. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. I think I can give you a few places to look for a little more information, Mr. Golden. I'm not sure if you've read the book False Prophets, which was about the BCCI scandal. Okay, this went on in the 80s and the 70s, came to light in the late 80s when George Bush Sr. was the president. there's a lot of information that intertwines with your story in that book. Okay, I've read the book several times. In fact, I just read it 2 days ago.
What's the fellow's name?
Pardon me?
What is the fellow's name?
The BCC. Oh, the book?
No, the book. Yeah.
Oh, you know, I can. It's probably in the other room, in my bedroom.
Well, but there was a book written like this that was discredited, and the man I don't believe is alive anymore.
No, this is a book that's written by two fellas. It hasn't been discredited.
Well, I think while Mr. Golden is answering this, you ought to go get the book so that we don't just leave the information there without the source.
Look, Brian, I have it, and I'm going to tell you another book to look for, and believe me, you're on the right track, sir. Hold on, I'm going to get the book.
Go ahead, Mr. Golden.
Well, there's, you know, I have a passing familiarity with the BCCI scandal, but I'm no expert on it, but there have been a number of books written on it, and there's no question that one of the leading figures in that was named Mahfouz. He was another wealthy Saudi Arabian, a banker, and I think he's friends with and has many ties with the Bin Ladens.
Is there a caller back?
Oh, I'm back.
Yeah. What's the book?
Okay, the book is False Prophets. It's written by Peter Truell and Larry Gerwin. Okay.
Peter Truell is a Wall Street Journal reporter.
There you have it. Okay, so you can talk to him personally. Now, what you said is right about Mahfouz. There's a lot of other people involved in that too. George W. is involved in it. Jeb is involved in it. George Sr. is involved in it. They're all hooked up. Carlucci was involved in the BCCI thing. Clark Clifford. Many high, big wig political figures are involved with the BCCI scandal. Orrin Hatch. But I don't want to go into that. You're on the right track. There's another book that you can look at called Clinton, Bush, and the CIA. And that was written by, I forget who it was ghostwritten by, but the guy who was the memoirs of was a guy named Terry Reid. You might want to look at that book.
All right, sir, thanks.
Yeah, I think there's another book also about BCCI, calling it something like Bank of Crooks and Criminals, something like that. And yeah, there's no question that that's a whole, you know, ripe, complicated area involving, you know, as players, various Saudi Arabian billionaires and the Bush family in some degree. But I just, you know, you really need a scorecard to understand the BCCI, but it definitely relates in some way.
We have one more call for you, and we'll wrap it up. Cleveland, Ohio, you're on the air.
Yes, I was going to ask Mr. Goldman if he thought it was worth looking into what oil companies are prospering from this war and what defense contractors are prospering from it.
Thanks.
Well, that kind of thing I think is always...
...are prospering from it.
Thanks.
Well, that kind of thing I think is always worth looking into, but I don't know yet what it would turn up.
Thank you, Dan Golden. And once again, it's a September 27th article in the Wall Street Journal. You say it's available on the website. If people don't subscribe to that or can't get into it, is there any other way to get it?
That's a good question. I mean, they could email me a request for a copy, I guess, at dan.golden@wsj.com, and I'll try and accommodate them.
dan.golden@wsj.com.
Right.
And we appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan Golden in Boston this morning. As we said earlier, he is from Amherst, Massachusetts, was at the Boston Globe for some 18 years and has been at the Wall Street Journal for the last 2 years and wrote that piece with two others on September the 27th. Tomorrow morning on the Washington Journal, Stacey Palmer, the editor of the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and the issue will be what's happening to all this money that's been generated, some $1.4 billion already. A lot of complaints showing up in the media about folks at ground zero not getting the money. Robert Oakley, former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan. James Grimaldi, a Washington Post reporter. The topic will be U.S. immigration laws. Then on Sunday, Bill Kristol, the editor of the Weekly Standard, and Ken Alabek, former first deputy chief of the Soviet biological weapons program. He now lives here in the Washington, D.C. area. And this morning at 11 o'clock, if you're interested, the Chinese Central Television newscast coming up in about an hour, which will give you an update on the president's trip over there. Thank you for joining us, and have a nice weekend.
You're watching C-SPAN, Public Affairs Television, and as was just mentioned, in a little less than an hour at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, we have a live simulcast of China Central TV news from Beijing. We're expecting coverage of the APEC meeting in Shanghai. President Bush is attending that meeting. Earlier today, he met with the president of South Korea. Later today, has meeting schedules with the prime ministers of Malaysia and Japan. That live simulcast of CCTV news at 11 a.m. Eastern Time here on C-SPAN. On Capitol Hill, the House and Senate have completed business for the week. The House returns Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern for morning hour. Legislative work begins at 2 p.m. Next week, Congress will continue work on fiscal year 2002 spending, anti-terrorism legislation, and an economic stimulus package. This week, the Senate adopted the conference report on military construction spending. Senators return Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for more work on foreign operations appropriations legislation. Live House coverage here on C-SPAN. Senate coverage on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. This afternoon,